Well, we've talked about the D.U.M.B bases and the black projects predominantly, and the alien agenda. I would like to stick to another subject called Strategic Defense Initiative. Of course, this could very easily be, as mentioned by my late friend Ronald Lee Rummel, who was murdered, incidentally, by the 3 people who conspired to kill him. One person did the killing. One was a NSA officer, and one was an alcohol, tobacco, and firearms officer. Both are in custody as we speak. The third gentleman is fighting extradition. He's in Czechoslovakia. Most likely able to successfully fight extradition because they don't follow the U.S. law very well. Anyway, the Strategic Defense Initiative is probably, instead of preventing incoming missiles, although they're now that most nations and favored and otherwise have nuclear missile technology, is probably some form of outer space defense against outer space attack, and it's pretty primitive indeed, but it's better than nothing. And the second part of my talk will be aliens and the alien agenda. I've already touched on that. Old alien bases. And like I said, Bikini Island, according to what was studied after the A-bomb blast, that some of the caves that were infested with out-of-place artifacts dealing with UFOs and other kinds of paraphernalia had rock forming around them, so they had been basically an alien junkyard in shallow seas for probably the better part of 10,000 years. So they'd been around. That you might call an old alien base. Dulce, New Mexico is another old alien base, or kind of a botryoidal or clear agate had formed over some of the parts laying on the floor of the existing base, and it takes an extremely long period of time, for geologically speaking, for this to form. The aliens have probably been here the better part of at least 500,000 and maybe as much as several million years, although I have artifacts here which show artifacts that like a small turbine-looking device sitting in 220 million year old fossil coral, and I also have alien metals which are present in other kinds of rock formations, including a piece of petrified wood where an insect had basically burrowed a hole around one of its limbs, and then something had literally, like a laser, had literally sliced through it, but the cambium or the actual layers of the wood had bent as the beam burnt its way through it. I've got that in here too, as well as an original piece of instantly petrified, looks like a garlic root that was found in and around Area 51. And this particular piece of garlic type plant was instantly petrified. It contains the same exact chemical structure of the quartz crystal, and the quartz crystal only grows in a certain left-handed crystal pattern, and that same pattern is extant on fossil, instantly petrified or fossilized plant life of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's identical, chemically identical. So, anyway, the next part of this, the second part of the talk, are treaties. Basically, there were 4 distinct treaties made through the United States government from the alien encounter. The first one was in 1944. The second one was 1954. The third one was 1962. And the fourth one was 1979. I'll go backwards. The 1979 treaty was a total violation of incidentally in Dulce, New Mexico, where I got badly hurt. 66 Secret Service and Delta Force people lost their lives, 22 of which were on loan from other countries, Israel, Germany, Norway, and South Africa, if I remember. I was the only geological engineer down there to analyze the situation. The government almost basically lied to us. They kind of said that alien presence might be there, but they didn't tell us that they knew that there was an alien base and that they'd already attempted to make contact. And of course, this was disturbing indeed. In fact, a couple of the engineers who managed to survive put the project under duress. Another part of the talk are the intelligence community. The Nazi group, the World War II Nazi or Hitlerian group, the Fatherland Intelligence Agency, trained our CIA, our OSS, which became our CIA, and other intelligence communities predominantly, and are still being employed today as we, in quote, the federal government today trains Bosnian troops on American soil, and from what I understand, that's totally illegal, and that's another topic. Now, the third part of the talk is the types of aliens. The large gray two large grays that I shot and killed. I can't tell you how ugly they were, and I can never tell you how graphic the stench was. But in the cave there were large cauldrons or tanks. They kind of looked like a big oval cattle feeding tank, but they weren't. They were special, looked like a stainless steel or metallic tank. And they were filled with alien and human body parts, and generally glands and what looked like some kind of blood. Now, I've always been taught that blood after a few minutes starts to congeal, but this was one of these vessels that in the melee had tipped over, and all this bloody liquid had spilled out and was a mess, and it was definitely not coagulated. How they did this is anybody's guess. If we remember anything about cattle mutilations, we might also think that basically the blood in these cattle are totally drained out. There's no blood around, in quote, the murder scene of the cattle. So this might be the way they're doing it. Now, whether this is sponsored by our government or other governments is a good guess. If it were up to me, I'd say yes, we're in the thick of it. We made a pact with the aliens, and therefore we must know what their agenda is, and also the federal government must also further know that if they keep the big lie going, they must be in the thick of it in the worst way, and if that's the case, they're an enemy of gross concern.
Who is we?
We, in quote, the federal government.
The Department of State.
Department of State, Department of the Air Force, Navy, Army, Marine Corps, basic force services, plus the military policing facilities, and the FBI and all that different. They're all hooked into the black projects as a whole. In this part of the black projects, there's kind of like an outer sphere of normal black projects, like building everything from these kind of aircraft here, and doing these kind of experiments here, to building aircraft like this, places like this. And that's kind of on the outside. On the inside of this circle, we get a tighter group of people who really know what the main agenda is, maybe even the enslavement of the human race as a remnant, or